All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. Your host here, Eric Kavanaugh, with a very special guest. Our good friend Sean Brem is here from CrowdPoint Technologies. We're going to talk about a pretty big topic and try to distill it down into some of its component parts and explain what it means and what it means for you, what it means for me, what it means for individuals and for businesses and for the future, for our economy, for where things are going and how we can get better control of our own destiny and of our own businesses and our own data, quite frankly. So the topic is Web 3.0. What does it mean? It's been out there a long time. Semantic web is what a lot of people talk about. Decentralized web. So semantics are important. Decentralization is important. And real quick, before I bring in Sean, what does decentralized really mean? Well, if you think about the internet, ARPANET, and its origins, it was designed to become a communication system that would not go down if one node went down. This is a fundamental principle of the internet, is that it can stand up on its own and bits of it can be taken down, and yet it still works as a communication mechanism, right? So you think about that, that's decentralization. But control on the web today tends to be very centralized, either at Google or Amazon or LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And what's happening? Well, power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you give complete power over a particular domain of the world, well, you're going to wind up with some corruption. We've seen that now at the Twitter files. Elon Musk came in, it only took $44 billion to show us what was going on over there. But as he joked, all of the conspiracy theories people had turned out to be true. They were conspiracy fun facts. So I throw that out there as a straw in the wind and as a reminder that we do have this exposure, and that's what it kind of boils down to. We have exposure to entities outside of our control, large organizations, of course, governments, etc. And what's going to happen now that the economy is teetering very significantly? I mean, the jobs report came in up. Okay, I know a lot of people just got laid off. Salesforce laid off 10%, Meta's laid off 10,000, apparently, Amazon 18,000. What does this mean? Well, decentralized web is one way to federate that power and to federate that authority and to get authority closer to you, closer to home. I guess I'll throw that as my foundation. And Sean, I'll bring you in. You've been in the IT business for a long time, in the real business world. You're an innovator. You build things. Sean is also a veteran. He's fought for our freedom. So he knows what it costs, he knows what freedom costs, but he also understands the technological underpinnings of what the e-commerce engine runs on these days. And you've got some pretty big ideas about how to change all that and to build on some old concepts, quite frankly, like the Buttonwood Agreement, et cetera. But with that long-winded introduction, Sean, tell us, what do you think Web 3.0 is all about?
Well, I think Web 3.0 is the reason why it seems so confusing to people is because it's also called the semantic web. So how many times, Eric, have you been in a conversation and it kind of starts to get heated and then one person throws like, well, that's just semantics.
Yes, right.
And like that's the defining moment of the conversation. And your response should be, you're exactly right. It is semantics. It's how I define things. Right. So when you look at this semantic web, it doesn't bother me that some people think it's metaverse goggles where you disappear for 42 hours straight and just play games. Other people think it's financial systems and cryptocurrencies. Other people think it's e-commerce. Other people think it's a personalized web experience. Correct. They're all correct. I mean, if you think about it real simply, is when in my past, when we were prosecuting targets, and we were looking at intelligence, we always looked at the spatial considerations, the temporal considerations, what time, thematically, and then semantically, how the enemy defined success. And when I go back to that spatial, temporal, thematic, semantic, let's just think about this. Let's say you're in the market, Eric, to buy a car, right? And so spatially, you live in the area, that you live in there, up there with your lovely bride and your wife. And then temporally, well, in the next 90 days, you're going to make a buying decision. Thematically, how do you define an automobile? Do you define an automobile as a sports car? Do you define it as a utility vehicle? Do you define it as an SUV? And then let's say, well, it's an SUV. I got a family. I've got these needs to move my family around. So I'm going to semantically define the theme of an SUV as, let's say, a Suburban. Well, there you have it. The semantics behind the definition of your purchasing decision drives all the other factors, because you need a Suburban. That means you need to find, okay, thematically, which programs or which dealerships carry the Suburbans. And then you're going to think, spatially, well, is there one near me? And temporally, are they going to have one in the next 90 days? So the semantics really are going to drive the future of the web. So I hope that's a real simple explanation of how I kind of see the semantic web.
Yeah, well, and it comes into play in lots of different ways. So you have an interesting example of a very big life decision of buying a car, because it's expensive to buy a car. You're probably going to be paying it for years. I mean, some people can pay it outright, but most people get a car loan and they're paying that loan every month. So it's a pretty big decision. And if you're trying to figure out which car to buy, well, knowing who has what inventory and where is kind of important. And of course, now you see a lot of these dealerships talking about, oh, well, pick your own car and like pick the color and the shape and all these different things, and then we'll have it made just for you and delivered to you. Of course, that happens over a period of time. But I think that the key you're making here with respect to Web 3.0 and the semantic web and this decentralized web is that there's going to be, and there are now these ways, it's going to be much more prevalent in the future, to get better information from other sources and from maybe more trustworthy sources. Because if you call the dealership, say you have this car, like, hold on, let me look, they go to their inventory and they see maybe they do, maybe they don't. There's not a lot of visibility through supply chains to get to things, to figure out what you could possibly buy, right? And I think that Web 3.0, which is more federated, it is closer to you. You've talked about edge computing in the past and how that comes into play here. Yeah. That becomes a source of information to help you make a better decision. You know, right now you go and you Google something and you'll get search results from companies that review cars, for example, but it's kind of hard to get to some of the most important information that you want to get to. And I think your story kind of hints that it's going to be easier in the future with a sort of Web 3.0 enabled world. Is that about right?
Yeah, because, well, let's give an example of let's expand upon your accident dealership. You say, well, I want a Suburban, and my wife defines the Suburban as white. She wants a white, which is actually interesting enough because that's the most sold color in automobiles. And she's looking for it, in the next, so that's how she defines an SUV. She's looking for it, temporally in the next 60 days. And we like you because you're within 20 miles of our home. Well, they're looking at a database that you don't see. And they're scouring. And what can happen is, well, they could say, well, yeah, sure, we'll have it ready for you in 60 days. Come on down and we'll show you pictures of the car. Well, it's actually could be all the way in Kentucky. But because they have access to data that you don't have, they're able to hide a few things because it's not open and honest. So now you've engaged all that energy, them full knowing, maybe the salesperson is just an optimistic guy that says, you know what, I'm going to do my best because I'm a good person, and I'll get George, who I've done with in the past, to make sure he gets on a carrier right away. And he's hoping he would because he really wants to make the sale, but his interest is greater than yours.
Interesting.
When you get into a truly decentralized environment with the semantic web, how you define things will immediately ping on multiple nodes, and you'll find out immediately that if you're willing to wait, that car is in fact in Kentucky. So I think that's a great small little example of what happens when you look at centralized systems today versus a decentralized and how we define things.
Well, so this is interesting. And folks, we're already seeing this take place, right? So you have all these web services that are coming out. Carfax.com, for example, is one of them, where you're getting more and better, usually, bits of information about what you're going to decide upon, which is to buy this car, right? And I think what Sean is kind of articulating here is that, again, in this Web 3.0 enabled world, it's going to be even easier to get access to those pieces of information, and you'll be able to trust the sources of information as well. This is what I call real world data at scale, and it's being leveraged now by large organizations. Facebook, Meta, of course, other large companies are using the daylights out of your customer information right now to know where to ship product, what kind of product to ship, what to offer you, all these things, but it's all behind the veil, so to speak. In other words, they have that almost like we're playing a card game. They can see the cards and you can't. And what you're talking about is kind of changing the rules, where we'll all be able to see greater detail about what's available and where, and therefore you'll make a better decision on the price, not just on what you buy, but how much you pay for that thing, right?
Sure, and why not? I mean, you brought up the term data. Data is the new oil. I mean, and here's the good news, ladies and gentlemen, your family is a refiner. Your family is literally an oil well.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you're doing though, is you're sacrificing the refinement of that data with value to other people, and then they're selling it back to you. I mean, when you think about it, if you've ever have you ever had the chance to maybe touch West Texas crude before, or just touch
No,
any raw oil out of the ground before, Eric?
no.
It's nasty. I mean, unless you get in some of that Midian oil in Saudi Arabia, it's dead dinosaur. It's kind of murky and lumpy and ugly. And heaven
Right.
forbid, British Petroleum lets it leak it lets it into the Gulf of Mexico. It's nasty stuff, right?
Yep.
And it's really just dead dinosaur. But when someone adds value to oil, it becomes fuel. And that fuel, the more value you add, the cleaner it runs. And it does
Right.
better for the lower emissions. It does so many things. Well, the same thing with data. Data is just lumpy, dead dinosaur. It's kind of, it's just lots all of it. Some of it's structured, some of it's semi-structured, and it's got volume to it. It's got variety. It's got volume, and it's got veracity, because some things, sometimes, believe it or not, people hide behind their laptops to tell the truth. So all of a sudden you've got volume, velocity, and variety, and all thrown out there. But the most important V is value, because data with value is information. So in the same way, oil with value is fuel. Well, information fuels the power of the internet today. So what I love about where we're going with the semantic web, at least where we're driving toward, is this concept of financial inclusion. If you're the oil well and you're willing to let someone else refine it and gain value, shouldn't you be remediated for that? Shouldn't there be some kind of return back to you, either in the form of discounts or group purchasing or just flat out payment? So what happens when each and every one of us start to stake our claim in our own oil wells as families or individuals, and we define our interests, now you've got this whole decentralized advertising and decentralized business models that start emerging that are completely disruptive, where the North Star becomes you. You're the most important component in all this. And that's really been, financial inclusion has really been a passion of mine since I've traveled the world, and I've been to, and our country sent us to strange places and seen the disparity between American wealth and global wealth. And then you start doing some work, through some charity work or military, going into some towns that are out in the middle of nowhere, and you start looking at, kind of the disparity of wealth. Financial inclusion has been our North Star, my personal North Star, and certainly for my business partners. And that's what we see the semantic web is really putting all of us in. How we define things should benefit us. And that gets us onto a concept of financial inclusion.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just again, to kind of bring this back into context for our audience, you look at the success of Facebook, the success of Google. Well, no doubt there were fantastic engineers with great vision who built amazing things. There's no doubt about that. But a huge part of the success is the ability to collect, aggregate, analyze, and then leverage the insights from massive amounts of data, of personal data, of purchasing history, of interest data, what you go to. And it's still very imperfect. I mean, as good as these guys are, my experience going on Google and finding things is not optimized the way I would think it could be at some point in time. And there are lots of reasons for that. We have rules around privacy, for example, but you look at GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and what it means and how it's actually applied and how it lives in the real world. And it's very messy. There may be a good vision behind this, but how that actually transacts, I think, is a pretty far cry from the ideal version, or the Platonic concept, if you will, of privacy. And so when you talk about Web 3.0, you're really talking about helping to build out a federated compute and storage engine, really, upon which e-commerce can be built. I mean, very quickly, that's the big vision, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when the key should, each and every one of us should be able to have our data at the edge, and edge computing is a great concept. But when you start tying that to decentralized systems and decentralized data store and decentralized clouds, it becomes more important, because the biggest reason each and every one of you want a decentralized world is we've seen throughout time that when people centralize, they tend to do things inefficiently. And then on top of that, they tend to take their influences. So I'm not faulting Twitter. A lot of people say, oh, Twitter is evil. It's this left-wing conspiracy. No, for me, I thought Elon Musk was very, very simple. He says, look, when you tend to hire a bunch of engineers from Berkeley, you're going to get the culture of Berkeley.
Right.
So I don't think this was this, evil Chinese collusion for socialism take over the nation. I just think you had a bunch of people from Berkeley that have their views. Look, I love going to Berkeley and debating. I gave a great speech one time there, actually there in San Jose with a bunch of Berkeley students in it, and the dialogue was interesting. But what happens is when you have an organization where they all were believing the same way, then tyranny of the minority kicked in. And we could spend for hours about John Jay and Alexander Hamilton and James Madison talking about that, but that's all that happened. But when you create a semantic web that's decentralized, it's free speech. It's pushed out. It's open. There's not one person that controls it except for you. And that's
Right.
when it gets real exciting is decentralization means that there's no central authority. And that has so many impacts on identity. It has impacts on markets. It has impact on banking and capital. It has impact on finance. It's a really exciting time because the more decentralized it is, means the closer it is to you, therefore kind of creating this whole vision of edge computing. And now your data is managed by you, but since it's decentralized, no one can steal it. So it's
Right.
pretty exciting where we're going right now, actually.
Well, that's a good point, and I'm going to throw off a couple of comments here before our first segment ends. The straws are in the wind. In other words, we're already seeing these things play out, and there's always a long arc for these things, right? Something starts early on, and then we talked earlier today about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, how that was a federated system where you would give some of your compute power to this search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which was brilliant. That was in the 1990s. That's a long time ago. And then in the recent past, we have something like Robinhood, like the story of Robinhood, which was all about financial inclusion, was all about helping poor people or middle class people get fractions of stocks, right? But what do you need? You need some sort of a clearinghouse to be able to do that.
That
And
was
guess what
centralized.
happened? The clearinghouse is centralized, and it got corrupted. When SHIT hit the fan, they pulled the string and didn't let people make money off this trade because they were exposed, right? So point being, you can have these good ideals, but you have to follow something through all the way to design and architecture and execution and follow all that into the next day, right? And so if you can't just pull the string on something and it all falls down. So we'll pick that up after the break, folks. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis with Sean Brehm of CrowdPoint Technologies. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to Sean Brehm of CrowdPoint Technologies. And talking about decentralization, Web 3.0, how it applies to financial inclusion, right? That's the title of the show in my head here, at least. Working title is Web 3.0 as a practical roadmap to financial inclusion. And it requires a lot of things. Transparency is crucial. Transparency of process, of decision-making, things of this nature. Think about rewards programs and how they'll change the rules on you. One time, I changed my rewards program with my local shopping store, Giant Eagle over here, and I thought about it like, do I want to do this? I said, okay. And then I figured out how they changed it. I was like, man, I wish I hadn't done that because they just got me when I'm at the store. They used to give you a percentage off on your gas. And then they figured out the algorithms went sideways because gas got so expensive. So they're like, oh gosh, we got to change this reward program. I didn't know that was what was behind it. I was like, okay, fine. And then I realized, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could go back to the old rewards program. But that's what happens when you have centralized control over things, right? Is someone can pull a string on you. And you see this a lot on the web, and not to get off topic here, but you get a lot of these freemium services where you can use it for free and it's very exciting. And all of a sudden, like, okay, now you got to pay for that. Right. And that's a go-to-market strategy in the web. It's free now, and then we'll pull the string later. It's okay if they tell you that's what's going to happen, but really they're just trying to get off the ground. So it's not necessarily a bad thought or plan. It's just that's how someone has to pay for it sooner or later. And we're all kind of paying for stuff now. So you've got this vision for decentralized compute, storage, and identity resolution, which is really, really important. You made an interesting comment too about how with a decentralized approach, the value of your purchasing history can be there for you to leverage at any given time at any place. So not just within Amazon or within Google Marketplace or within these closed circuit type operations, but no, giving someone their purchase history that they can then leverage as a semantic matrix to find the right things for them. That's what you're talking about, right?
Well, yeah, why not? I mean, it's your personal portfolio. It's an asset class that you own. But right now you're surrendering it on a daily basis. It makes no
That's
sense.
funny. Right. That's interesting. It's an asset class. So we talked about this before, meaning again, folks, when Google and Facebook and these other big companies leverage the power of your data, they are aggregating your purchasing history, demographic information about you, for example, whatever they can get, they're going to leverage to better understand who you are and how to sell that to their advertisers, to the people they do business with. What Sean's vision boils down to is giving you an infrastructure and a mechanism by which you can control that and then leverage it in an anonymized way on a blockchain that has persistence and is also a general ledger. So it's this very well thought out vision, and it's also backed by silver contracts, silver streaming contracts, if I'm remembering this correctly.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you're trying to give people the benefit of their purchase history, the benefit of their ID, and what that really means. That oil you talked about, that unrefined oil at this point in time, let them refine it in an environment that they control. And this is a big story now. Identity resolution has been a story for a while now. It's a bigger story now. And if you get that right, guess what else happens? Fraud goes down significantly. Mischievous characters are going to have a harder time. And this is my big complaint with governments and organizations in general, is that there's so much of this fraud. There's so much of this miscreant behavior. Why can't we solve for that challenge? I think the short answer is we can, but it's, for some reason, it's too costly in the minds of the people who control these big machines. What do you think?
That's it. It's too costly. Look, if you ever heard that saying, it's hard to turn a battleship once it's going a certain direction. Well,
Right.
that battleship are these great companies. I mean, Facebook, Google, Amazon, phenomenal companies, but we didn't have the compute stack capability. We didn't have the kinds of things that we've learned over a period of time to go decentralized immediately. So you went centralized. So when you're centralized, all of a sudden you create a business ecosystem, but that ecosystem really becomes a business ecosystem because the person who owns the platform extracts the most value, but you're the value behind the platform. So you get this weird conundrum of chicken and the egg. And so I just think, I think the world is ready for decentralized. I mean, just look at the collapse of FTX alone and cryptocurrency organizations. I mean, and Robinhood, they exposed an industry-wide, structural weakness when you can take a centralized system and throw in human personality. Right. I mean, notwithstanding the failure of FTX, the premise of decentralization is really good. It means democracy. It means egalitarian. I mean, decentralized represents a more favorable opportunity for all of us on this call. It's a more favorable opportunity for financial inclusion. What I love about this country is, when capitalism is defined the way it's supposed to be defined, and not by some of the Carnegies and the Rockefellers, and it really gets down to the backbone of a nation, which is your mid-market and your small and medium business. Man, right. It's really exciting. I mean, decentralization, those interactions in decentralization provide a creation of new applications overnight. And for moving assets, and you're one of them. Your data is an asset without the ability to create backdoors. I mean, as you said, Twitter, how embarrassing. They're changing the database. They're in there quietly arbitraging decisions and then deleting things because they could. Right. It was centralized. They could. Look at this Sam Bankman-Friedman guy. Right. I didn't know. I'm sorry, dude. I'm so sorry. I don't think he knew. I think he was just a classic young, arrogant guy. I tell everybody, when you hit your 50, you realize how much you don't know. And I think at 29, 30 years old, he thought he knew it all. Right. But he had the ability to change things behind the scenes. And without that immutability and transparency, just the boogeyman creeps in there, right? So what I think is the state of affairs that we're seeing with the Googles and the Facebooks. I mean, heck, right now, Elon Musk was afraid Twitter was going to get taken off the Apple store. He had to go fly and meet the CEO of Apple. On a decentralized environment, it's much safer. And I think what's happening today is, I love the FTX, the cryptocurrency, all these problems. It's really it's the next gen. I mean, when you look at the failure of the dot-com boom, some really great business models came out of it. And that evolution is happening now with decentralized technologies. You know, you've got regulations coming to a perfect storm. You've got these new technologies. I mean, and then on top of that, we got a recession coming.
Right.
I mean, look at history. When recessions hit, even you saw a small recession, you know, you saw a big one in 2008, but you saw one in the dot-com bust. You know, think of all the things that if you had just gotten into back then that were tiny that ended up surviving. And I think emerging technologies and decentralization are going to replace these failed business models and challenges that they give. I think you're going to see Wall Street capability with Main Street practicality. And I think decentralized cloud, kind of a database that's also ledger and storage, just is really going to be a great approach. And that's really what we're excited about. We're excited about creating a next generation cloud that's a comprehensive security solution. It addresses the needs of both individuals and business users for apps, data, infrastructure, and this decentralized environment kind of creates this whole new concept of interconnected business and social solutions that manage data that constantly gets wider and wider and wider to the point that it just starts computing at the edge. And edge computing has got some great promises as well. So I'm happy, honestly, that we've kind of had some foresight and we're sitting here with these turn of events and we're kind of in the catbird seat.
Well, and just to kind of really break this down for people, because I guarantee that there are folks who are going to hear this and scratch their heads to understand how decentralized works. Well, first of all, it's already decentralized to a certain degree. If I'm on my computer and I'm all logged onto Amazon.com, there's something on my browser, there's information that's loaded into my browser that I'm looking at. That's one system, right? That's my computer. And when I click on things, it's sending messages back through the cloud to Amazon, and they're making decisions, sending decisions back to me. In a decentralized cloud, what Sean is talking about is where it's not just going back from that cloud to my machine and back to that cloud, back to my machine. It's actually putting out instructions to the federated compute nodes, each of which can pick something up and deliver it back. Now, there are efficiencies you gain and efficiencies you lose in a system like that. But when designed well, when designed efficiently, and when run effectively, that becomes a very stable environment, because now you can't just take down to Amazon. Like Amazon goes down. I mean, it doesn't go down very often. It does happen. They have outages. But the point is, the less centralized something is, the more resilient it can be. And what Sean is really talking about is this new architecture, this a whole new fundamental way of creating the stack, the traditional tech stack that is decentralized, that is federated. And it absolutely can happen. It's happening right now. And his point is that the future is going to be more federated. And that's going to be good news for all of us if we solve for these very critical challenges, one of which is ID, is decentralized ID. And I guess real quick, you have some very interesting technology on this front of being able to kind of map. I know you don't maybe want to tip your hand on everything, but just give the audience a little bit of an understanding about decentralized ID and how that actually works in practice.
Yeah, the concept of a decentralized ID is that you actually own your identity. But when it becomes decentralized and distributed, it's actually your portions of your purchases and about you are kind of in this database, but instead of it being a centralized database with rows and columns, it's distributed. And that means that now your identity can consist of 1, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 files located in different sites, aligned to the same person and on entirely different networks. Right. So boy, hacking becomes real hard. The portions of the data about you
What a good point.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because, again, you have little bits and pieces, and then of course there's a map. Like think back to the old days of MapReduce, right? You got a map that is in your centralized or your decentralized ID to all the other bits and pieces about you that will come into play if it matters. So now I'm in San Diego. I'm normally in Pittsburgh. Now I'm in San Diego, and my decentralized ID with all this information about me can be leveraged with anyone in this ecosystem, so they know, oh, he's in San Diego now. He likes this kind of dinner. He likes this kind of meal. He likes this kind of whatever. All that kind of goes with me in this environment, and it's safer because it is decentralized. Because if someone hacks in here, they can't hack across all the way through to kind of coalesce.
I mean, global cybercrime is $15 trillion. And you know why cybercrime is so big, Eric? Because they're all trying to steal your medical records. I mean, the whole world's about either stealing them or ransoming it. I mean, so the nice thing when you start putting this on decentralized identities and all the data about you is portions of you are stored in multiple physical locations and processed in distributed across distributed or multiple nodes that are out there. And so what that means is it's kind of like a next generation document storage system when you think about it, about you, whether it's passports or all your, and it's going to be it's be really, really high performance. It's extremely flexible. It's really massively scalable, and it does three things. There's three things listeners and watchers should get out of this. Number one, it's more efficient. Number two, it benefits businesses and people. And number three, it returns us to, I'm going to use the word, a democratized and egalitarian marketplace. It's more efficient because the decentralized system itself adopts this data redundancy. In other words, lots of copies of it and load balancing to make sure it can be accessible for really fast stuff. And then security. Like, think about the money we're spending on data security. Where basically people can hack into a centralized database, run a SQL statement and steal it all. Or if they can't hack it, the really good hackers can hack it because they'll rootkit and come in. The bad hackers just ransom you, stand and deliver, right? Well, when this is all decentralized, you can kind of point the IP address and go, try and find me. So because that, and the reason why is because many copies of your data is available at various nodes and computers and different locations. Even if one node stops working, it doesn't lead to data loss. And not only is it more efficient, it's more beneficial for you because it provides people and businesses an affordable and efficient avenue to make and receive payments, access investments, savings, products. Even building credit history becomes really, really powerful because now all of a sudden the transactions about your data actually add to your score. Vogue, the powerful thing about a decentralized environment is it also facilitates the verification and traceability of multi-step transactions. So you can't hide stuff anymore. And that's really important when it's open, honest, and stable. And then it's also beneficial because it ensures secure transactions. That means all of a sudden you're more compliant if you're a bank or you're a company and you're trying to get compliant. Lower costs, accelerated data transfer, things tend to move faster, and then sharing between people and processes and businesses. And at the end of the day, I mean, companies are going to adopt it, your small business, because it helps in fair contract administration and product auditing and for your entire supply chain. But what I love about it the most is this: financial inclusion and democracy to me are go hand in hand. Because without a strong capitalistic environment, you're going to have a strong democracy. But unfortunately, when capitalism corrupted, you don't have financial inclusion. So a decentralized environment provides a new kind of availability of cloud computing resources that are completely decentralized. They're decentralized computer nodes. Think of them all out there, where no one person, no one entity has central control on the network. And because of the increased nodes of privacy and private compute nodes, it becomes so close to where you are. It's an edge compute. Now, all of a sudden, if I don't like the way you speak because you all didn't go to University of Wisconsin and you all work for a company and you guys were all in a certain sorority or fraternity, and we just disagree with that because let's say you're a Sigma Alpha Epsilon and nobody likes SAEs, and well, all of a sudden you're being blocked, and you say, this is crazy, Sean, this doesn't happen. It just happened.
Right. Well,
it just happened. And you don't think that Twitter is a singular bunch of people that decided they're smarter than you and I? Right. We're flyover country.
Right. Let's pick that up at the break, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to Sean Brehm of CrowdPoint Technologies. So much to get into. Web 3.0, financial inclusion. Web 3.0 is a roadmap to practical financial inclusion. That's really what we're talking about. And you can see facets of this everywhere. You can see the fintech revolution. You can see what Zelle did to the Western Union business model, for example. Well, those same paradigm shifts apply to data, to information systems, to compute, to storage, to all these things. Everything is changing very, very quickly now. And Web 3.0 is, I mean, it's really going to usher in a whole new way of doing things, of building things. And Sean has this really compelling vision about how to do all that. And it starts with the blockchain. Now, people are very familiar with the term blockchain. It is what was designed to underpin Bitcoin, but that is not the only use case, and it's not the only blockchain. So you've got Ethereum, you've got a bunch of other blockchains, and a proprietary one called Vogon. And Sean, just to go into the weeds here, Sean, it has deep experience in technologies like Hadoop. He taught himself Hadoop. Let me tell you, it's a difficult thing to do, okay? Hadoop is the engine by which Yahoo would index the web using something called MapReduce. You'd map out all the terms everywhere, reduce that to a formula. That's how they're able to tell you where to go to find stuff, right? Well, that's a centralized process. Like everyone goes to Google to get their information, and most people who pay attention now know they get skewed results on that stuff, not just because of the advertisements, but if you get political on Google, trust me, you're going to have a hard time finding information they don't want you to find, which is another story for another day. But
which has also recently come out, right?
What's that exactly? Well, there's a lot of these stories are coming out, and they're going to come out.
Joke about a conspiracy theory, give it about 12 months.
No, I haven't heard that until it's a conspiracy fun fact. But let's talk about this. You guys built a blockchain, and it's got a bunch of really cool things going on here. One of which is the polyglot translator, right? So you can take any code of any kind. It could be Java, it could be C#, could be C++, whatever. You don't care.
Nope.
And it also has, you have this concept of mitosis, which is pretty deep stuff in terms of how this thing works. So scalability, we're learning a lot of lessons here, folks. This goes way back to, in fact, Yahoo, the open source community, all these guys in the 90s were really trying to figure out how can we scale up capacity when peaks of performance are required, like on Black Friday or the holiday season, et cetera, and then scale back down. So first we saw the scale up. They're still working on the scale down, to be blunt, with the audience out there. But you've got this concept on your blockchain, which of course is immutable. That's a beautiful thing about blockchain. It's immutable. You can append records. You don't overwrite anything. You're just appending records. So you have this complete audit trail to know where things went. So you don't get backdoors. You don't get FTX, where once the whistleblower came out, then $5 billion disappears. Well, how'd that happen? It happened because they had a backdoor. You don't want backdoors. You want transparency. You want trusted, honest, open markets, right? And the foundation is this technology, right? Tell us about Vogon blockchain and how it's different and why it plays into this whole story.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you the problem that solves. One of the main problems faced by this whole concept of progressive decentralization in Web3 is how to store large amounts of data in a decentralized way. That's the big problem you have to solve. So Sean, what problem are you solving? Well, when you think about, the current blockchains of today, given the prohibitively high costs of storing data directly in popular blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum, we decided that it would be both a database and a ledger. And I remember I was doing some show, I can't remember what it was. I think it may have been with you, where we had those guys in the UK that were
yes, that's right.
Moving wine, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember the guy from the UK. He's like, "Well, what's the problem with the blockchain? It's an incredibly slow database."
Right. That's right.
You're right. And it's really expensive. So we said, sometimes it's good when you don't want to wear the yellow shirt at the beginning of the Tour de France. You want to wait for a while, right? And that's what we did. We kind of hung back and we saw, well, what if we were a decentralized database and a ledger? Right. So we really wouldn't be a decentralized cloud, and we really wouldn't be a blockchain. We'd be kind of like this new thing. And so our Vogon decentralized cloud it's like a blockchain because it has all the benefits of a blockchain, but it's not a really slow database. It's extremely fast, right? And then on top of that, we've taken this DoD grade stuff we call CrowdBeam, which allows us to take 20 megabytes and compact it and blur your financial information, and then everything about you owns with your own unique ID, and then your ID is then queried, hey, can I see who you are? And people have to pay you for it. So this combination of decentralization with a ledger, it's really a quantum leap for storing large amounts of data sets infinitely more efficiently than current blockchain, and infinitely more scalable than a current cloud. So for example, if you were to take a gig of data and put it on the Ethereum blockchain, it would cost you about $20 million.
Wow.
That's not really efficient, and it's incredibly slow database. So we built a technology that not only reimagines that whole tech landscape, but also helps verify and traceability of all the multi-step transactions. That gets back to the democratization side. It provides verification, traceability. So it gives you all the benefit of a ledger, but it gives you all the benefit also of like a really effective distributed database, like MongoDB is a great example of a popular NoSQL database with a continuously expanding growth model in the data sets. We kind of modeled a lot of that. So inside of our blocks is actually a JSON. It's a document. So now all of a sudden you can basically take this healthy combination of having transparency with the blockchain and decentralization and the distributed document stores and securing identities through a process that literally shrinks, compacts, it secures, and it speeds up data transmission. We think we're just like the oh wow moment in tech, right? And again, every tech CEO thinks that, but it's working. It's like I said before, it's Wall Street capability at Main Street practicality, and it provides permission-based blurring of your sensitive data, and you can have these clearinghouses that you engage to unblur your data. It offers, it's really what I love about it, and we'll kind of jump in as we're gonna brag a little bit, is it offers several properties that cloud consumers are interested in really varying degrees depending upon their use case. First of all, my number one, I'm a huge federalist, former military officer, resistance to censorship on either side. No single entity can take down the content.
That's
the
great.
Open market approach implies an architecture where data is not locked to a single provider. That's what I love about it. Second, the truth is the truth. It's immutable. Data governance, lineage, and transparency. Governance, data governance. Where did it come from? How did it get to where it is today? What's the pedigree of this data and its transparency? All that's guaranteed. Resilience, data integrity is guaranteed literally by this massive storage redundancy where what happens is our block, as you said, is a polyglot. That's like for your Star Trek fans, a universal translator, right? Essentially what that means is when there's a request, it goes, oh, do I need more data storage to store more data relative to this document? Okay, I split like cellular mitosis to create more storage. Oh, I need more compute capacity. Like, I'm trying to do something with a virtual machine. Well, the block splits to create compute capacity. Or do I need it to support a different language of the same data? Because I'm currently using Python and I want to go to C#. It splits to that. So it's very resilient. It's extremely resilient. And then pricing is comparable to a centralized cloud, but it adds the additional benefit of being both an edge and because it's so decentralized. And so now all of a sudden you've got this better version of what we're seeing with centralized cloud architectures today.
Well, it's a de facto edge everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Isn't that what it kind of boils down to?
Yeah.
I just wrote that down as you were talking. It is a de facto edge everywhere because every node will have information that's relevant at that point. And when it needs information from somewhere else, it grabs it from somewhere else and enriches the current node or the current array of nodes that are focused on this particular problem right now. And that gets into efficiency gains, right? I mean, what we're trying to wrap our heads around here is how the architecture changes, how the runtime changes, because it's a very topographically challenging world out there. You got all these different devices people are on, all these different phones, computers, laptops, desktops, et cetera, different operating systems. You think about what Kubernetes has done for enterprise computing and for the cloud. It's kind of interesting. You're almost
It's like a micro DevOps inside the block.
Metaphorically, yeah, you're in a sense, you're at least in the same spirit
Yeah.
of trying to democratize access, because that's really what Kubernetes is all about, is saying, look, you're going to have this diversity of systems that are trying to do something. Let's go to the root level and enable whatever someone has to do whatever they need to get done, right? So it's interesting. I don't think it's necessarily aligned perfectly in terms of the architecture and what you've done, the code that's been written essentially, but in terms of what it enables, it's a very similar kind of conversation. And over time, it's going to get better and better, I'm sure. But the key is the decentralization, is the federation, no single point of failure, no choke point, no person who can just say, no, I don't like this person for political reasons, I'm going to shut them down. This is very interesting stuff. A podcast bonus segment is coming up next, folks. You're listening to Inside Analysis. Okay, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here with Sean Brehm of CrowdPoint Technologies. And Sean, there is this last good point we wanted to dive into. You just told me about it today, in fact, a template of the CrowdPoint ecosystem for chambers of commerce.
Yeah.
You always got to start somewhere, right? Like, you can think big, but you always have to start local. What do they say? Think globally, act locally, right? You want to act locally. Chambers of commerce are great for this particular use case because you want people in your chamber having commercial relationships with each other. That's the whole idea, is to help each other to do different parts of the process, right? Have insurance and financial products and healthcare and consumer packaged goods, whatever, to know who is in your community, who is, maybe their kids go to your schools, et cetera. It's a great place to start to kind of roll this thing out so people can see what it means and how it works. Because again, folks, you're talking about optimizing lots of different parts of the stack: the storage of information, the sharing of information, the privacy protocols around what gets shared, how you benefit from these things, how you keep track of these things. And then, of course, indices, being able to build indices and understand future pricing, where things might be going. Look at the inflation that everyone's dealing with right now. I mean, even Cardi B had a funny little TikTok she threw out there about inflation, and people said, oh, you're so rich, why do you care about inflation? She goes, I care about inflation. Are you kidding me? I care about my friends, and this is wrong, what's happening. Well, we want to get to the truth. You made a good point earlier. The truth is the truth. It's a very real thing. And in this version of the world, this vision that you're hashing out through CrowdPoint Technologies, you're building a foundation of future trust, right?
Oh, that's true. And I wish I could say I came up with the idea of using these chambers of commerce, but it was a friend of mine named Khalid in Abu Dhabi, and he's a very prominent person there. And he said, Sean, this is perfect to survive the recession storm.
Right.
If you've got this decentralized database, that means all these businesses within a region can leverage the common data. They can share the common customers. They can incentivize. And it's really easy to use. You built a real simple decentralized cloud costing model. So there's monthly billing. So for low amounts of money, you can basically organize a region and effectively make optimally performing businesses within a region. And I thought that was really good, especially as you look at going into recession. There's going to be people are going to cut back. They're going to coalesce. They're going to create partnerships, and a decentralized cloud where you can leverage the collective intelligence puts you as a competitive advantage. I never would have thought of that. We are currently been targeting small and medium businesses and allowing them to kind of choose their supply chain and how they want to integrate it. But this whole concept of using these chambers of commerce is a great way to do it, because it's going to be about community. And then this next 12 to 40, some people are going to say this is tougher than 2008, and look at what happened in 2008. And so I think you're going to see economies kind of congealing together to get through this thing. And I think we're kind of purpose built for a time such as this.
Well, and that's very interesting, because again, you have to have a go-to-market strategy for things, and people, I think, are getting a much better appreciation in the broader business world around databases and what databases are and how databases operate and so forth. And people who have worked with Amazon can appreciate what Amazon built is amazing. I mean, I actually set up an Amazon instance for a friend of mine who was selling hot sauce And it was, it was not an easy thing to do. It's not a very intuitive environment. You really have to read instructions and logs and things. Like, all right, what is this for? And what is that for? How do I connect these parts? I mean, it's hard to do.
Yeah,
But what you're
exactly.
talking about now is offering a template because that way it could be an additional perk that the Chamber of Commerce offers to its members. You get access to the system and incrementally you build up over time. But the kind of stuff Sean is talking about, it will solve at some point in the future supply chain issues. These are
100%.
very challenging problems we have to deal with. I know I ride a bicycle. I love riding, and you could not get a bike fixed in 2020, mid 2020 because of COVID, because all the parts are made in China
Yeah.
and you couldn't get it. So
Couldn't.
that has a significant impact on business, on forecasting,
There
and how I
probably
spend
were
my
parts
day.
destroyed somewhere. Yeah, but they weren't visible because
Yeah,
centralized data.
right. That's exactly right. So we do, again, you see bits and pieces of this everywhere. But I think what's cool about CrowdPoint is that you're focused on building this foundation, this future foundation that is backed by streaming silver agreements, as I recall,
Yep.
and is very forward looking and transparent so that we can all benefit from the kinds of data and insights that now only large organizations get. Isn't that right?
100%. What you're seeing in our company is a clear path using decentralization as the journey to financial inclusion. We've taken the human identity and we've spread it across massive decentralized cloud. We've taken marketplaces, which you've seen us work on, and spread them across massive decentralized databases to protect the business owner, the reseller, and the customer. And we've allowed the consumer to use a secure identity and payment method that travels with them wherever they go, and it reimburses them. We've taken capital and decentralized. Our press release recently you saw on Bloomberg about our banks that are partnering with us, and decentralized it so it can be shared between people for instant settlement and better banking. And then we've taken finance and companies and decentralized each company and their earnings so that it provides open, honest, stable markets for all of us to invest in, at the small level, going back to the original Buttonwood Agreement. We've decentralized everything to ensure that the tyranny of the few cannot control the financial inclusion of the many.
Right. That's just fantastic stuff. Well, folks, look these guys up online. Google CrowdPoint Technologies.
Or crowdunit.com. They can go to crowdunit.com, crwdunit.com.
crwdunit.com. Lots more to get into as this grows over time, but I love the vision. I love the functionality that you've built in and your experience where you're taking this thing. It's just wonderful stuff. Look him up on LinkedIn. He's got a lot of great fun posts on LinkedIn. Sean O'Brien Brem of CrowdPoint Technologies. Folks, thanks so much for your time today. You have been listening to Inside Analysis.